Hello everyone, this is Highlander from MTG Cardsmith doing another custom Magic Gathering card review, and today we're reviewing a card by Rayne-Lord, the man with the sumo wrestler as his avatar. And we've got a card here called Edict of Purification. This is a 2-and-a white for an instant with Decree white. You may exile this card from your opening hand face down. You may look at and cast it for its decree cost as long as it remains exiled. Okay. Exile target creature with mana value 4 or less. Then, if you cast a spell from exile, that creature's controller gains 2 life and draws a card. I see. Okay, so basically the way this works is you can play this as a 3-mana exile target creature with CMC. I guess CMC is still faster to say, isn't it? CMC? No, that's 3 vowels. Mana value. Mana value, 4 vowels. CMC is faster. Okay. I'm just going to say CMC. Then exile target creature with CMC 4 or less. Okay. So very simple card in that circumstance, right? Now, Decree, the way this works is if this card's in your opening hand, you get to just stick it on the battlefield. Or not on the battlefield. You get to basically stick it into play face down. And it's also not in play because it's exiled. You get to stick it in your exile zone face down. Just right off the bat. And then anytime you want, you can pay white to exile a creature with mana value 4 or less, but then that controller gains 2 life and draws a card. Okay. I mean, interesting. This is an interesting mechanic, Decree. I kind of like... You're like, I decree that I have this spell that I shall cast later. Yeah, so this is kind of neat. This mechanic. The question is how. I mean, okay, in limited, this is a totally playable card, right? I mean, 3 mana to exile a creature with mana value 4 or less. It's great. I feel like in limited, you would never really use this decree because having them draw a card is just bad. It's just bad value, right? So like in limited, you would play this, but you would probably never decree it. But it would still be like a good card. In constructed, I mean, you might do the decree thing. I guess if you're playing like... Okay, so if you're playing an aggressive white deck, and you're playing against like some deck that's going to be like some deck that's playing like Birds of Paradise or something, you might decree this. I don't know. It feels like this card wouldn't quite make it into constructed, if you ask me. Like 3 cost to exile something conditionally doesn't seem like it's quite good enough in constructed. It is instant, which is nice. And 1 to exile and have them draw a card is like pretty bad, I think. I mean, just this draw card is like kind of bad. If this had like Scry 2 or something, or like Scry 1 or just gaining more life or you know, something like, I get it because you're taking this effect and you're making it cheaper, so you're like tacking on a sort of a downside to that. But you have to remember also that this card has to be in your opening hand for you to do that, which is like, well, okay, so on the one hand, that's like not, it's like kind of a little bit, I don't want to say it's tough to do, but like it you know, it's not always going to happen, right? You're not always going to have this card in your opening hand. So sometimes you'll have this card in your deck and it'll straight up just be 3 to remove something, right? So you can't really like count on this decree, basically, right? It's sort of just a side bonus. And it's sort of like a pretty random bonus. That's kind of the other thing that's a little shaky about it, I guess, is like it's a random bonus. So I get why you're tacking on this, like this sort of downside. So the question is, like, would you ever decree this? Like, what would you ever decree this against? Like, what kind of a deck? Birds of Paradise deck, maybe? But you still don't want them drawing a card. and then they're gaining 2 life, which also like kind of hurts your aggro a little bit. Plus, you want to be playing 1-drops on turn 1 anyway, in like a white aggressive deck. In a control deck, you never want them to draw a card, and you don't want really this conditional removal. So this seems like more of a limited card to me. And in limited, you would never play the Decree here. I think this Decree cost is a little bit too intense. I think if I were you, what I might do to this is either change this other mode. So what you probably want with Decree, because they have to make the decision to Decree it at the beginning of the game, right? And I'm pretty sure, don't get me or correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure this happens before you even know what they're playing. I mean, you may know what they're playing because of other circumstances, but let's just say in a vacuum, like if you're playing on the MTG Arena, for example, you don't know what deck they're playing. So you have to make this decision like up front. And that's like kind of, that's pretty tricky. Like so I don't know, like this mechanic is interesting, but we kind of have to figure out like how should we use this mechanic, right? Because you have to make this decision up front. So like the only information you have, presumably up front, let's say you're not playing a best of 3. Let's just say you're playing best of 1. The only information you have up front is what cards you have in your hand, right? So maybe you would, choose this for, I don't know. It's this mechanic is interesting, but it feels like it's a little bit restrictive. It feels like it doesn't have like a ton of. I mean, there's certainly design space there, but I'm struggling to like find it. Because I don't know if you want this to just be an upside where it's like the ley lines where it's like, oh, this card's in my opening hand, bam, it's just automatically better. I like that you're not just doing that. Right, because I think that just sort of adds like an element of RNG that's sort of unnecessary. But here's an idea. So either you can do what you're doing here, which is you make the card cheaper and you sort of make the card a little bit worse. And there's actually a number of ways you could do that. So like, for example, you could say like if you cast this card from exile, then you exile a creature with mana value 2 or less, for example. Or you could say, if you cast this card from exile, it's that creature's controller, like I said, gains 3 life and scries 1. Or you could say like, you could make the Decree cost 2, for example, and only tack on like the gain life, maybe something like that. Because in that situation, then this card becomes a little bit more interesting, I guess. The other thing you could do is you could completely change the way the card works if you Decree it. So, for example, because I sort of come to this because of the idea that you only have your opening hand as information. So if you make the Decree like a completely different effect, like let's say, and I'm not saying every Decree card has this specific effect, but I'm just saying like this card in particular could say something like, normally it is this type of removal spell, but if you Decree it, then you draw a card and gain a life or something like that, right? Because maybe your opening hand is a little rough, so this sort of lets you smooth it out. You can basically like sacrifice your removal spell to smooth your hand out, right? That's sort of one idea. So so I like the idea of this Decree quite a bit, but I think I don't know if you're kind of going in the right direction on the usage of it. And who knows? Maybe it's just this particular card, right? Like. It could be that the other cards are just completely fine. But that this draw card is just like such a big drawback that for example, let's take a look at a card that like kind of does something like that, which is what is it like? Investigate. There's one that like exiles something or investigator. Oh right, I have to do this. There's a card that like destroys or exiles something, but then you give them a clue. Like Deck and Stone, for example, right? Okay, and then there's a similar one that's an instant that destroys. So like here, let's get a better one. So like here, yes, you're giving them a card, but they have to pay 2 to draw a card off their clue, so they actually have to spend mana on it, and you're exiling a creature unconditionally. You know, in this case, you're just straight up giving them the card for free, and they're drawing 2, and your removal spell is still conditional. Now I know that this is a rare and yours is an uncommon, but still, I think you're getting my meaning here. Like, it feels like that you would never want to play this card in its current state. The only time you would play it is in limited, and you would probably never use the decree. You would probably just spend 3 to kill something that costs 4. You know what I mean? So yeah, those issues mentioned. I'm gonna give this card. I'm gonna give this card a 6 out of 10. I think it has potential. Like, this decree ability has potential if done correctly. But I just think this is not the right way to go about it, in my personal opinion. So yeah, there's potential here, but I don't think it quite comes together on this card. So 6 out of 10 for this one, and I'll see you guys next time.